let's do it. Hello, everyone. My name is Pasha, and my surname is heavy to pronounce, so we won't care about it. This talk, you probably already know its name, so let me introduce myself instead. I used to work at JetBrains when I started working on this talk. It was like slightly more than a year ago, and I was a developer advocate for Kotlin. I still like Kotlin because, well, I used Kotlin for a long time. I started using it long before they released the first version, and long before I joined JetBrains, actually, and I'm still using it. But I'm actually a polyglot developer. I tried many JVM languages. Obviously, I started with Java, but I also touched Python, Clojure, Scala, you name it. I touch a lot of things. And also, I'm a full-stack developer. I used to develop frontends in JavaScript, and before JavaScript was popular, I developed frontends in Git, Google Web Kit, for example. I kinda not a huge fan of this part of development, but I totally can do it. The only thing I can't really do is CSS. CSS is too complicated for me, and we'll circle back to it in some time. Yeah, but I like TypeScript, for example, and I think that TypeScript has amazing type system, probably better than many other languages, including Kotlin, which, again, I love. And honestly, I have kind of abusive relations with Spring. I used Spring throughout my whole career, for more than 15 years already, but it's very magical. It's very magical, and I do not always need all this magic. I do not always need all the stuff that Spring brings into my life. And this is why, yeah, when the Spring is not enough, I start to experiment, I start to look into other options. Before we jump into my talk, I'm obligated to show you this slide. I work for Bellsoft. I'm grateful for them for sending me here. Bellsoft is one of JDK vendors. We are a vendor of Liberic JDK. We contribute a lot to OpenJDK. We author some JEPs, for example, support for ARM32, or, for example, support for Alpine Linux has our own implementation. We publish a lot of technical stuff, and we almost do not publish marketing. So if you're interested in all things Java, you can scan this QR code. Probably you'll find something interesting for you. Yeah, we also have our own Linux image called Alpakita Linux. It's very simple, very small, and so on. And yeah, we know our stuff. We know our Java, we know our JVM languages, and JVM itself, since we are heavily involved in its development. Now, when we are finished with this boring part, let's talk about the perfect world where we all work in enterprise, which should work perfectly. We have teams in our company. All these teams are two pizza, so maybe, I don't know, 5 to 8 people, reasonably sized teams. We use battle-tested tools in our development. Spring, I don't know, Hibernate, Oracle, or Postgres, whatever you like. We always have sensible time frames to develop things we need to develop. It doesn't happen that somebody comes to our life and says, we need this feature yesterday. No, it doesn't happen ever. We always have realistic goals. Nobody asks us to create a button which will automatically solve all the problems of our users. We have enough resources to do all the tasks. And yeah, we do not work on useless tasks because business always knows what it needs, what is the next big thing that should work. And if in this perfect business, who are we as a perfect developers? First, we love our battle-tested technologies. We love Spring, Hibernate, our databases, and so on. We work really, really fast. I mean, we are high-performant. We do not have emotions. We are just robots. We do perfect estimates. Yeah, I probably won't talk much about it. And we really understand our business goals when someone asks us to implement a feature, we really know why this feature should be implemented without asking. But reality is different. And I'm kind of happy that it's different because I do not like perfect things. Perfect things are boring. We used to be tired of boring things. But actually, reality is sometimes rough. Sometimes time frames are unreasonable. Someone comes to us and says, hey, we need this feature as soon as possible, in 2 days, please. And there are never enough resources in any company. I mean, I'm in the industry for more than 15 years. I wasn't in the situation where any idea we need to implement, we already have resources, we already have people, we already have time to implement this idea. It never happens. Sometimes, yes, but it's not like a rule. Usually it doesn't happen. And also, complex technologies are usually complicated. And Spring is very simple to use when you exactly know what you are doing and when everything is perfectly documented. But imagine a situation when something is not in documentation, or you just do not know what you are looking for in the documentation. You need to find solution. You probably will need to debug Spring. I did it many, many times in my life, and it was good but imperfect experience. And also, developers, at least me, at least myself, get bored of these technologies. I want to try something new, otherwise I just burn out, you know? So the nightmare is when someone comes to us and says, hey, we need to write this project ASAP. We do not know what do we need. This project should solve this task, but what is this task? We don't know this task. And you should do it alone. You should do it alone because we do not have, everyone else is occupied with something else. What I want to say, we have problems and I have solutions. And we, not we people sitting here in the audience, we as industry have problems. Because we live in imperfect worlds. And I, as a speaker, hopefully have solutions to some of your problems. And the solution is kind of philosophical. I'm saying, sometimes we should be just software craftsmen. We should write clean, readable, and maintainable code because, well, even if we work on it alone today, tomorrow we actually can have a team which should be able to read and maintain the code. But we also should continuously learn. We shouldn't get stuck with one technology all the time. We should learn because when we learn new things, we can later use them. It doesn't mean we should push random stuff into production. I do not want to say, please take MongoDB and push it in production in your next project. No. But please learn, please study MongoDB, understand when it's good, when it's bad. And then, with this understanding, you are becoming a better developer and better software craftsman. We should test your work. Andres told this during his talk that in 2006, one person said, if you're starting unit tests just now, it's already too late. I'm repeating the same thing in 2025, sorry. Please test your work. Without tests, nobody knows how your product works, including you, even if you lie to yourself that you do. Collaborate and share. When you learn new thing, be it MongoDB or things you learned during today's talks, share your knowledge with other people. It makes you a better developer. It makes you more valuable in your company. And, well, it enriches everybody's experience. It makes the world better. Of course, you should pursue technical excellence. I'm not a huge fan of slapping shit together and deploying it. I know sometimes we have to, but it's not our goal. I would prefer to avoid it as much as possible. Given that, I want to present you a tool belt for simple projects. And I will talk about why they should be simple in today's talk. This tool belt essentially consists only of 3 components: Ktor, Kotlinx HTML, and htmx. Ktor. Here is the brief introduction to Ktor. Ktor is a framework created by JetBrains, and it contains both HTTP client and HTTP server. It is written in Kotlin. It supports coroutines. It means that it is asynchronous out of the box. If you have some kinds of asynchronous interactions with other services, with databases, with something, you wanna have asynchronous something. It's very lightweight. There are no annotations, at least I'm aware of. And, well, just considerably smaller than Spring. And it's also very flexible. You can use it in a way you want. It's not a framework which forces you to write in one style. You can choose your style. As I already said, it's built and backed by JetBrains. Here's the smallest possible example of running a Hello World application with Ktor. Fun main. Fun just stands for function. It doesn't have output type. Inside this function, we call a function called embedded server, and we say that it should be netty, and we want to run our server on port 8000. Then we should define some routes, because otherwise, well, where the customer will go. And inside these routes, we have this very simple dialect, DSL, if you will, domain-specific language for defining our HTTP routes. When someone makes a GET request to root of our site, we respond with text, hello world. It's not even HTML, it's just a text. And when we defined this very basic server, we should start it and say that we are interested in waiting it. There are use cases when we are not interested in waiting it, but we won't talk about them today. As any good framework, it has a lot of plugins. Maybe not as a lot as Spring has, but all the essentials are there. First of them I want to talk about is content negotiation. The name kind of speaks for itself, hopefully. In the content negotiation is a content negotiation between client and server. You all probably know HTTP headers accept and content type. When client send us a message that I accept application JSON content type, it means that the server should respond to his JSON, right? And Ktor will respond it understands that. When we install the content negotiation plugin and configure the JSON support with some optional properties, it can serialize objects to JSON. Almost as Spring does. But in Spring Boot, it is all done with the magic of auto-configuration. Here we install plugins manually. And then when we can define a route like /customer/ID. Then we can extract parameter from this request, obtain our customer from customer storage, and say call.respond customer. At this point, Ktor will convert customer to the required content type, JSON, XML, whatever is supported and whatever is needed, and return it. The second plugin I want to talk about is Webjars. Who knows Webjars? Oh, let me tell you about Webjars a little bit more then. Webjars is an amazing thing called, it's located on webjars.org. It is essentially many JavaScript libraries packaged as jars and located on Maven Central. So if you need to add support for any library, jQuery, Bulma, whatever, in your application, you can just, Bulma is right here on a screenshot. You just put it in there, and you see right here how you should add it to your project. It's just org webjars npm, and then artifact name, and then the version of artifact. And this way, we can add support for any front-end framework into our backend. How Ktor integrates with Webjars, it's actually very simple. We install Webjars plugin. As always, all the plugins are installed the same way, and then they're configured almost the same way, but they have different configuration properties. Here we say that when an application asks for a resource from /assets, please look inside the Webjars we have in our dependencies. And this is how we add dependency on Bootstrap. For example, in our application, we say /assets, /bootstrap, /bootstrap CSS. Also compression. I'm not sure if it's needed in your small project, but well, it's just nice to have, and it costs us almost nothing to support it. We add compression plugin, and we say that we support gzip and deflate, and that's essentially all. Call logging. This one is very important in my opinion, because usually you wanna know what's happening in your application. If you have some weird bugs, if your users complain, you want to be able to trace what's going on, what were the requests, what were the responses, and so on. This is how we configure call login. We add dependency on call login. We install call login plugin. Then we say that we are interested in logging on the info level. We log only requests starting with /, which is essentially all the requests, but you can obviously define your own filter you wanna. And we want to add MDC, which is data in logs additional called call ID. This is all about Ktor. Everything about Ktor I wanted to say. Are there any questions at this point? I can answer something. Okay, no, then no. Then let me tell you a little bit about htmx. htmx is located at htmx.org. They're high-power they advertise as high-power tools for HTML. It's a JavaScript library which you just add like this. You just add dependency on it in your HTML. And then you declare some specific attributes. We'll talk about them a little bit later. And it allows us to replace one data on our page with another data. For example, if we have if our server answers OK to this button, then the button will be fully replaced with this span OK. I'll show you it in a minute. We are not obligated to update the particular div which has the attribute of HTMX. We can update things out of the bounds anywhere on the page, actually. We only have to know its ID. And the glue between HTMX and Kotlin is, in my opinion, Kotlinx HTML, which is also a very nice way to write HTML right in Kotlin. For example, we can say respond HTML, and here we build the whole HTML we want to return to user with head, title, and text inside it, and body with some header inside it too. Now, let's look at how it looks in a really small application. So here's the very small application. You can see that everything I do, I respond with HTML, which has dependency on HTMX. It also has one button, which does nothing, like here. Also, yeah, I have a template root, which I will fill a little bit later. Let's launch our application. Hopefully it will launch. The only thing, it's always takes some time to launch. OK, it's there. Let's open our browser. So you can see the page. You probably can't. Here's the page. And if we look into its sources, there is absolutely no magic. It's our head with one dependency on HTMX and body with one div. Nothing fancy. Now let's make it a little bit interactive. For that, we need to add a couple of attributes to our button, something like this. we need to say that when we make a post request to /transform, we replace outer HTML of our button, so it means this div, with the element which will be returned from the backend. I have this /transform, and let's fill it. It will do something like that, this. We will respond with HTML. We do not need to create full, we do not need to create full HTML. We just create a paragraph with text, I was a button. Let's try to restart our application. Now it's better, now it's faster, I like it. So I have already updated the page. Let's check that it's really updated. Yes, now our button has transform and so on. Let's click it. And this is the smallest possible demo of theoretical technologies bounded together. If we will look into what happens in our network, give me a second, let's clear it. What happens when I hit click me? We have this response, which only contains one small piece of HTML, I was a button. We didn't write a single line of code. If we would use jQuery or something like that, we will actually have to find a place where we should replace one element with another, and so on. Here, we don't need to do anything. htmx knows for us what should be replaced. This is the small demo. We'll have a slightly bigger one a little bit later. Let me switch back to my presentation. Yep. So, as I said, a lot of time I spent with Spring, so I actually cannot imagine life without DI. Ktor doesn't have DI framework out of the box. It only is responsible for web things, all things web. But there are DI implementations supporting Ktor. The one I like is called Kotlinx, which stands for Kotlin Dependency Injection, right? And this works like this. We can declare the DI block right inside our application, and we say that, for example, if I need a random in my application accessible as a dependency of something, I will just bind a singleton secure random to random. What you see here is kind of DSL inside DSL, because the outer part is Ktor DSL, the inner part is already Kotlinx DSL. And this is how things play nicely together in Kotlin. It would be harder to achieve this syntax in Java because of specifics of Kotlin and Java respectively. And then when we have defined these dependencies, in our routing we can create controllers which depend on our random or whatever we need to depend on. And this is just done with this function called instance, which finds the dependency needed in this particular part and puts it in there. And now we are slowly coming to our sample we will be looking at today. I have a small pet project. It's a library. I have a lot of books, and they are in obscure FB2 format. Probably no one have heard about it. That's okay. It's just an XML, a bunch of XML. My issue is when I store all these books just on my hard drive somewhere, I do not have a nice way to navigate over it. I cannot find my author or book by name or something else. And I also need OPDS. OPDS is a very old but somehow still living format for feeds of books, or usually of books, which allows us to less powerful devices to not render web pages, but actually navigate over XML. There is a formal specification on spec.opds.io. We are not really interested in it right now. The domain of books is very simple. Well, at least seemingly. There are books, and they're kind of core entity. They are bound multiple to multiple. with authors, because one author can have many books, right? And one book can have many authors. Books are parts of sequences, and each sequence may have one to many books. And there are genres. Every genre obviously has many books, and some of books have many genres too. And some would say even all the books have several genres. I also use Jooq in my project. Jooq is just a nicer way to write JDBC SQL queries, in my opinion. I'm not big on Hibernate and technologies and ORMs. So Jooq, this is how, on the left you see the actual SQL query. On the right you see the query I built from with Jooq. So it's select author ID and count of asterisk. In the Jooq, it's essentially the same, but I have this create.select from book, and it's the same in Jooq from book. Group by author ID, and in Jooq, it's the same group by book author ID. And then I have one additional line of code in Jooq. I should say fetch, because otherwise, and I hit this bug a couple of times, I just forgot that I have to actually fetch data for it to be fetched. In my opinion, it is very readable for anyone who knows SQL. If you are not familiar with SQL, if you prefer ORM, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't stop us from understanding my talk, hopefully. Here is what we are going for. Give me a second, I'll authenticate in my library. So yeah, I have a lot of authors. It takes some time to load. I don't know. Let's just click random stuff. This is my way to navigate over authors. Yeah, and well, I have libraries. I have way to read some description of a book. I have links to genres from the books and so on. It's simplistic. I also have search. Let's look for Hail Mary. Yeah, it's there. Andy Weir, highly recommend to read this book. Yeah, I also have this nice, I can click on a picture and it will enlarge, then I can click outside. And for all of this, I didn't write a single line of code. It's only HTML and a sprinkle of magic. Let's look at the organization of an actual application. So, the actual application starts from the main class. And we are not interested in this part, right? Whoop, please. Okay, cannot fold it for some reason. Why? Okay. This is what I do. The only thing I do in my main function is initialization of database. Then I start the Ktor. This is how I do it. Engine main.main args. It does a lot of magic inside. Magic includes reading this configuration file, which I write in Hakon. And this file says which modules do we want to turn on. Actually, the whole application is modularized. For example, di.kt. Let's navigate to a file called di. Here we go. We see that I define my data source here. I am not obligated to, but I like to control this stuff. Actually, Ktor, if I remember correctly, can do it for me. I use it inside this singleton. Here is how I initialize my Jooq connection. And this one, Ktor doesn't have support out of the box. So I actually have to use instance data source here. So it knows that I need to inject my SQL data source. I use SQLite database for the whole project. Probably you don't do it in production, but it doesn't really matter for this particular project. I also, what is very important for me, since I need several ways to access my data, I need a unified way to access it. And as I would do in Spring, I have repository. Here it's just called repository, and I have servers to work with books. If you look into repository, essentially consists only of Jooq queries. It returns some data. Sometimes it returns pairs of data or just date. Well, obviously, we need a lot of things to know about our books. What else I have? I have monitoring, right. In monitoring, I turn on call login, as we saw in the presentation. I log everything on info level. I also install a plugin called CallID for all my HTTP interactions be easy to identify. And on each call, I verify that call ID is not empty. Otherwise, I couldn't log it properly, and I would lose some data. It means that my frontend behaves incorrectly for some unknown reason. What else do I have? Yeah, of course, I have installed my compression plugin exactly the way I show you. I have disabled Webjars for now because currently my application is sitting in internet, well, closed, but in internet. But for your real-world applications, if you are in some closed contour, I don't know, air-gapped network, you will probably want to add Webjars. You will probably want to add, I don't know, HTMX and Bulma into your application. By the way, I didn't say a word about Bulma. Bulma is just a CSS framework. I do not know CSS, so I use CSS frameworks to build more or less nice interfaces. And of course, I have routing. I define routing in many places. Here, I define 3 my controllers, OPDS, and we are interested in OPDS and API. Let's navigate to API. Yeah, it has info service as dependency. And here is how many routes look when I have them. So I have the route like API, and I have /search, and many, many others. For example, I can navigate by authors. I can navigate by genres, and so on. Every time when I make a request, I get a piece of HTML. But let's look at, for example, what happens if I want to open a particular author. First, I extract its author ID into my application, very explicit. There is no way to do, at least yet, to do it like in Spring, when you say, this is my path variable, I want it to be long. We actually should extract it. We do it like this. We get parameters of our request, and we convert it explicitly to long. If it's not long, if it's, I don't know, some random letters, the application will throw an exception, which probably is a good thing. Then I do some business logics. I find series by author, and so on. And then I create HTML. And create HTML is actually an interesting function. Nope. Give me a second. Yeah. I create div with name grid, and there I return something like which looks like objects. Navtile. Actually, navtile is just a function. It doesn't create any specific object, but it looks like almost like we have templating and ready-made components. So this navtile, it is obviously a navigation tile. Okay, sorry, obviously for me, probably not obvious for you, which has some data inside it. It has article, and it has a couple of paragraphs. And also some logics with pagination and so on. After that, I create breadcrumbs, and breadcrumbs is again just a function with some specific attributes on it. It says that when I hit a piece of breadcrumbs, I should navigate to some link, and we should replace in HTML. And yeah, obviously, breadcrumbs is just an unnumbered list, as in many, many CSS frameworks. By the way, I didn't show you this part. Plus name is essentially the same as text name. It means, please put this string right inside this A. So it's a value of our anchor in our application. What is next? And then I have this function called smart HTML. It's my name. Sorry if it's dumb. I tried to make it as smart as possible. The thing is, I should be able to refresh any page from scratch. And here we see that sometimes it doesn't work. And I'm sorry for that. Obviously a bug. And this is why I should test my applications, and I didn't do it. So when you refresh your page, your browser won't send an HTTP header HX request, which means that a request was done from the HTMX. And this means we should respond with full HTML of the page, with head, with all our, I don't know, links, meta information, icons, and everything and everything. Like this is like the main page. This is what the main page looks when it's written in Kotlin. We do not save much of, I don't know, much of traffic here. We do not save any space here. What I like about it, it's typed. We do not have to write any HTML because for me, HTML is hard to read, hard to parse because of all the triangle brackets and so on. And actually, Kotlinx HTML allows me to write something more readable. For example, if I need to add several attributes on my input, I just work with them as with map. I can add placeholder to my input. I can set all the HTMX attributes and so on. On the other hand, if I don't need attributes, I do not care about them. I just can create span and put an icon inside it, like it's done here. Should be relatively familiar to anyone who worked with HTML and with any CSS framework. And well, to me, it's just, I like that I have auto-completion. For example, I can put random stuff here, I don't know, add one input here, and it will be auto-completed for me, or I can add one more div, just empty div, or div inside it. And if I want, I can convert any of them to a standalone component and return this component. And this makes my backend kind of extendable. My front end doesn't need to know all the styles for all the components. It can make a request to some endpoint, and this endpoint will return a piece of HTML with a piece of CSS, which will be added to the page, and it will work properly. We cannot do it with our usual, I don't know, React front-end, for example, because in React, we should know all the possible components in advance. Here, we define all the components on backend. We don't need to, I don't know, to change our front-end if you want to return a different component. Say you want to change a card of the book, you want to remove image from it, that's fine. Just remove the image, front-end will work, continue working as it should work. And yes, give me a second. As I said, I have this repository, and I also have a class called OPDS, which creates a huge XML for me. I use Kotlinx serialization in most parts, but one XML is hard-coded, which is actually fine. I mean, this particular piece of XML is defined in OPDS specification. I don't need to convert to make any kinds of serialization. I can just say, hey, respond with this text for me and set content type to this. I do not even easily know how to do it in Spring because, well, it is probably something to do with the views and so on, but it's so much easier to just return string and put a content type on it that I can't even say. And also, you can probably see that this function search book by text is inside my service, which is injected in all the controllers I have with dependency injection, coding. We can find all the usages of it, right? Yeah, all the 3 usages. They use different data returned from it, but that's fine. And this is how, for me, it becomes a little bit more enterprisey and a little bit more production ready. I can inject my services, my repositories, and so on. However complex they are, I have DI, and I can reuse components which I use in my application. I reuse the same data, I only change the way of rendering things. With htmx, I render HTML pieces. With OPDS, I render XML pieces. And do I have an example? What do I render? No, I actually do not. Oh, yes, I do. Book info is an actual, no, it's a string, no. I don't have an actual example, but it works. And it's very simple. When we know that the user requests XML, we just convert our entities, our DTOs, to XML. You already saw how it works, so it's probably time to jump back to my presentation. Yep. Here we go. It is all the content I wanted to show. I'm ready to answer any questions, but let's summarize a little bit. What did we learn? What did we learn today? First, in my opinion, Ktor and htmx are extremely powerful mix. They're very comfortable to use together, especially with Kotlinx HTML, but I can see other ways too. For example, here's the author of the Phoenix library, which allows you to render HTML pieces in a completely different way. And this is also, it will also perfectly fit Ktor and htmx use case. htmx is, you're not obligated to know or use JavaScript. This is what I like. When you are the only person on the team, or when there are two of you, and you don't want to develop a complex React, Vue, Svelte, whatever, complicated front end, htmx will probably be good for you. htmx won't be good for you if you need a lot of interactivity, like in enterprise applications. When you have complex tables with a lot of things going on, you need to constantly update something on the page, then probably it will be cumbersome to write it in htmx. Then you would probably want to fall back to Vaadin or something like that. You're still not obligated to know JavaScript, even if htmx doesn't. Oh, what I didn't show you is hyperscript. Right, I felt that I forgot something. Hyperscript is a very simple, and this is a wrong class. Come on. Yeah, so there is a small script language which integrates very well with htmx called hyperscript. This is how it looks. On click, take is active from the item with ID model, then wait 200 milliseconds, and then remove model from our page together. At this part, I need to show and hide pop-ups with information about books in my library. And this actually is copied right from documentation on htmx. It's just the cookbook. I never needed anything more complex than this. Yeah, thank you very much. Here is how you can find me, a lot of all the social networks and so on. And now it's time for your questions. Any questions? Well, thank you then.